Every winter, Mikma and her family travel by foot from their village deep in the Himalayas of Nepal to sell local medicinal plants in urban markets. This year, construction of a new highway to China has begun in their roadless valley, and things are never going to be the same. The documentary film Baato, distributed by Tull Stories, is at once a sensitive portrait of a family that has thus far existed largely apart from the trappings of modernity, a fascinating chronicle of the epic journey they embark on each year, and a penetrating depiction of the culture and politics of Nepal. The Garden Cinema's Joe Bond talks to co-director Lucas Millard during a satellite Q&A following a screening of the film.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks. I'll just I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, and then we'll open it up. So please gather your thoughts and your feelings about the film. It's a beautiful film. Congratulations on it. It's seems elegantly simple, but there's so much beneath the surface. There's so much going on. And we all love films about puppies crossing the Nepalese hills. Can you tell us about the family and Mikma and how you struck up that relationship?
Sure. Well, I'd love to talk about the puppies instead, but I'll talk about how we met Mikma first. So when we originally conceived of the film, this was my first time in the area where Mikma's village is, but my second time really spending a lot of time in that valley of the Himalaya. The first time was in the 90s. I was an anthro student studying social anthropology, looking at porters and how goods were getting around in kind of the non-touristic areas of Nepal, household goods and things like that, which people would carry on their backs in those days. And everybody would talk and dream of the roads because they heard stories about other places in the world which were also mountainous, that did have roads, in Europe and the Americas. So we knew that, to make a long story short, and not to belabor the story, but we knew we wanted to tell the story of the road, but then find stories of people along the road or who had to traverse what was becoming this highway. And when we first went to the area, we embedded with a nonprofit organization in Kathmandu, had connected us with a local from that area who was in Kathmandu, who agreed for a nominal sum to come with us and just kind of introduce us, because it was the first time we were there. We were kind of we were under the auspices of doing a scout, or what they call a recce, I think, over in the UK. But we decided to take our cameras anyway, which luckily we did. But we met her on that first kind of foray into that area when we were really on this research / filmmaking kind of trip. It was our first trip in. And when we met her, she was winnowing. It's the scene that opens the film, basically, is the first time we met her. We were with a younger participant who had agreed to, who was on that day, agreed to, host us on her daily outing of going and winnowing the harvest, because they all do that as a group activity. It's a shared economy. There's not a lot of cash, so people work for their neighbors in exchange for their neighbors working on their fields. And so she was there, and we just struck up a casual conversation. I had heard about this Kavala, and we thought it was a great kind of arc for the story and a great metaphor for what we're trying to say, and would be a great vehicle for telling the kind of story we wanted to tell. So I just kind of jokingly said, "Can we come with you? Are you doing this?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." This was 3 months before she left. And then it's a longer story, but then when we came back and we actually started filming with her for the Kavala, like that all, like, I don't know if she believed us that we were coming back. And when we did, and everything kind of came together the night before her family was leaving on this trip. So we didn't really know each other very well. We had met once before, but we just kind of threw ourselves into her life and her family's lives. And I mean, she was very graceful with the whole thing. Her kids were wonderfully graceful. Her husband was amazingly graceful. So I think it was just a happenstance, good luck, and just volition on our part for wanting wanting to use this idea of this migration as a great vehicle for telling the story of the changes that were happening there. Yeah.
And by we, you mean you made this film with another filmmaker, Kate, and it sounds like and it was quite an arduous, I mean, filmmaking process by the looks of it. A lot of trekking around.
Yeah, by we I meant like the co-director and the project, Kate Stryker and I were the principal filmmakers during the production of this whole thing. In post-production, I have to give huge credit to Eric Metzger, our editor, for teasing the story out of the footage that we captured in a very wonderful way. So yeah, I missed the question, Joe. Sorry, I just wanted to recognize Kate, who can't be here unfortunately today, but she would love to join. She has a day job. I'm the flexible freelance filmmaker in the family, so we're actually partners in life as well. Yeah.
Amazing. I guess that's what I was getting to was how did you work as a partnership across what seems like quite a challenging shoot?
Yeah. I mean, it was my baby in the beginning, but we really did join forces and come together. It was really important. I think Kate really brought a lot of this idea of including women, and we were really looking for strong women's stories because of that. I think it's just it's a sign of the times, but I think it's really important. And it's not like we were like, let's find a family where the woman is the female lead in this village, because everybody in the village goes on this journey in the winter, or almost everybody. About 3/4 of the village empties out in the winter because there's just nothing going on in the village. So, but it wasn't that we were looking for a family with a strong female lead. Particularly, we did know we wanted to include female voices in the story, and we feel really strongly that female education is part of the solution to some of the problems that are coming and have been coming to rural Nepal. But it just happens that that particular culture, the women do take. I mean, in other families and other groups that were going, the women were also equally strong. There's just a kind of strength and steadiness that we've been asked before, like, where does that come from? And I don't know if I have a great answer, but I just feel like it's great that Mikma was so willing to lend herself. I don't know if she really knew what she was getting into, and I don't know if she knew that people would be sitting in London watching her dance across the screen. But she did get a chance to see the movie. I wasn't, unfortunately, there. None of us could go. It was during COVID, but we did send the film to the village. It was screened at least 3 times. We saw photos, and we get little brief messages, but it's still hard to maintain a steady contact with people in the village. So we don't know exactly what she feels about it, but we generally get a vibe that she thinks it was a positive experience overall. And we have been able to collaborate with some nonprofits in the area and funnel some support back their way. Not directly, but in a general way to that region. There's a few nonprofits that we've been in touch with and done some fundraisers for 2 of them so far. So maybe the 3rd is on the way. I don't know. You can find out more about those on our website. But yeah, there are.
Congratulations.
Those exist. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you one more question before I open it up, which is just about the soundtrack that I was listening to on Bandcamp yesterday, and it was really just immersive. I know one of the performers does these performances where you lie down and then he surrounds you with ambient music, which sounds really great. And also the song towards the end of the film is really beautiful. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Originally, we wanted to do the film with no music. That was our original conception. We were like, real life, this is direct cinema, this is true. We're not going to manipulate people's emotions with musical movements. But Eric, much to our chagrin and his credit, our editor, let us know that he had tried to cut movies together without music before, and that they just don't work. Or they do work in very rare instances. So he put some temp music in his original cuts, and we're like, okay, it's working really great with this Max Richter song, and there was probably some Brian Eno in there and things like that. So we we compromised our original vision early on in our editing process with Eric, and started seeking somebody to collaborate with to create a soundtrack. And luckily we found, I mean, we're in the Hudson Valley, New York, and it's kind of an arty little town here. It's called Beacon, and they have second Saturdays with the galleries open. And I had noticed there was a solo ambient kind of musician that sometimes sits in the corner, sometimes in the corner of a park somewhere with a little amp and toots around and just makes sounds. And I eventually worked up the courage. Well, I mean, we kind of became congenial just because I would chat with him, but I eventually worked up the courage to ask him if he would be interested in doing a soundtrack or he ever had before. And he had done some work for like Nickelodeon kid shows, and he doesn't consider himself a composer. He's much more of an ambient musician that, like you say, he plays a lot of live sets around and collaborates with other artists and curates an ambient music night at a local bar in town every month. And so he took our material. We gave him little like emotional cues, what the scenes were about, what the movements of the music we needed. He saw the rough cut, and he just kind of went to town and gave us 5 cues for every 30-second little part we needed, so we could pick and choose. And then after it was all done, and we thought he did an amazing job. His name's Craig Chin, and he runs under the moniker Errant Space. And like you said, he did put together. He took the soundtrack that we put in the film, and then he remixed it with a lot of our field recordings that some are in the film, some aren't, because we did during production pay a lot of attention to sound and did capture as much ambience and natural sounds as we could while we were in the Himalaya. We cheated a little in post, filmmaker's secret. Like our sound editors did insert some birds from, I don't know, Mali or South Pacific in some place. So I was like, no, you can't. That's not the right bird, but it's in there. And it's just a beautiful thing. He kind of made his own little thing of his music that he made. It's different from the film, but it kind of has like the construction sounds and like a lot of natural sound. He really played with the same kind of motifs that the film plays with in his soundtrack of it, and it's available for free for you guys to listen to later on if you so choose.
I think the sound is a really important, beautiful part of that film, and it doesn't detract from its ethnographic sensibility.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We're gonna we've got a roving mic, so if anyone, I'll stand up for a bit.
Oh, good. I can hear you, but I can't see you. That's good.
Okay. Just hang on. Would anyone like to ask a question to the filmmaker, and we'll bring a mic to you? Yes.
Yeah, I was picking up from the film clearly this thing about the major highway going through, key theme that it was obviously resulting in some individual cases of disruption and displacement from some families, some dwellings and so on. But I was wondering, I wasn't completely sure, but you would have a clearly better understanding of whether the villagers in general felt that this development, these developments were always obviously for commercial reasons, for big business and so on, but was there a feeling with the villagers as a whole that this development was going to be a complete disruption or even destruction of their traditional ways of life and their village, or was there any value they thought was going to be gained by it? We heard about the people say, oh, my son now going to, once the highway comes, they're all going to evacuate and go to the town, we'll never see them again. But was that typical, or was there a general feeling of negativity or positivity, or was it more complex than that?
Yeah, that's a big question. We get that a little bit, and I think from our perspective, what I feel like the film is successful in that way is in that it raises the question. We never really wanted the film to answer the question or presume a bias one way or the other. Although as filmmakers, of course, we do have our own biases, and as Westerners experience the Himalaya and experiencing the Nepal for the first time, there's a tendency to kind of romanticize the beauty because it's true, it exists. It's a different feeling when there's definitely something special about the Himalaya. That said, like good or bad, it's so hard to say. I mean, it's just happening. It's happening, and it has to be kind of embraced. Our issue with it is there doesn't seem to be a lot of controls on the process or even involvement. Like sometimes we found that it felt like we were sharing the news to people about certain things that were happening along the road construction because we would spend time there. So I know, like, for example, that bulldozer in the water, when we returned to the village and said that we saw it, like a few other people had maybe seen it, but people relied on us as kind of expert witnesses. And it made us feel a little bit like, well, whoa, that's different. That's like, now I kind of feel a little bit like I'm part of the story that's of the change, you know? So it's on the good side, healthcare is a huge need in Nepal in general, especially in the villages. It's really heartbreaking, some stories. You get bit by a snake and you could get carried out, and if you get to the hospital in time, you're okay. But if not, you know, like you could easily perish. It's pretty common to see people carrying sick old people along the road because there's no other way. You just have to put them in a chair or put them on a plank and you carry them, get 4 people. And, you know, often helicopters, politicians will come for kind of, you know, photo op visits or like, this is our new development program, and they'll helicopter in. And then occasionally, if there's somebody really sick in the village, it's bedridden, they can negotiate a seat on that helicopter on the way out. So that's kind of like their hope if as things were standing before the road. So, you know, the access to healthcare is a huge benefit of having a road. But like you alluded to, roads don't just allow, you know, and a lot of people are also thinking roads are great because all these conveniences will come into the village all of a sudden. It's like, oh, our lives will be so easy because you can just drive all these goods and materials and we'll get to improve everything because you don't have to pay, you know, X amount of money. In the old days, you would pay human toil for porters. Now, in this intermediate stage where the track was being created but not finished and cars weren't quite navigable yet, there's mules that come in, and the mules, like you see them in the movie, that's a very temporary thing. Those will only be there for the next 10 years, and then once the road opens, they might go off and branch off the sides, but they weren't there in the 90s. There were no mules at all. I mean, that's something that just came about in the past 10 or 15 years. They're like, let's bring the mules in because they can carry the goods. They did have like yaks and yak breeds that would carry it, but carry stuff, but the beast of burden was truly people until about 10 years ago. And now nobody porters, there's a road, it's only mules. And pretty soon, and now tractors are coming, and so these tractors that can ford the rivers before the bridges are completely finished is where the state of it right now. And so you can get to the village on these tractors. So they just take the medicinal plants, and rather than carrying them out, they just pop them on the tractors, and they may walk alongside or meet them at the market down the hill, you know, but it's already changed. The road is not complete, but it's already kind of changed. And we heard from some villages that a villager from that area that has expatriated to the US, that just the joy that because everybody has these childhood memories of these migrations and like traveling with family, sleeping under the stars, big caravans kind of thing. It's gotten smaller. It already was breaking up, and kind of it was already in midst of a change what we recorded, but now it's, yeah, you kind of lament like, oh, the beauty of your life and your connection to nature and all that is starting to change, but it's still there. And I think for us, it's like, you guys, our whole stake in what we would tell people along the way is that what we're worried about is that there's going to be people that will come and see you as middlemen, and then they can go straight to the source and collect outside. They won't need you anymore because they can come in themselves and collect, or you'll sell it locally and you won't get as good of a rate. And then, it just seemed like there was some organization, I'm not like, my heart is like, just unionize it, but I don't know how to do that, so yeah, there's good and there's bad. I mean, if you look from a touristic, because a lot of Nepal's economy is from tourism, let's be frank, that's the biggest chunk of their economy. And the Annapurna circuit used to be this very famous 3-week circuit around Machu Picchu, the Fishtail Mountains and the Annapurna Mountains, and near Pokhara, Nepal, kind of the center of the country. And it's been years now, but they put a road almost all the way around. Almost, they left one section in the northern part without a road, so there's one scenic section of it yet, but that whole trek is like this legendary trek from the 60s and 70s, into the 80s and 90s, and in the early 2000s it just got broken up, and now nobody I mean, people still go to the area, but they don't do that circuit so much anymore, just because you're just walking along a dusty road. So it does detract in some ways. It's not an easy question to answer, unfortunately. But that's the best I can do. Yeah.
I think that's interesting about the feeling of being involved. I think the road is part of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the world, and more than 100 countries are investing in this, including Britain. So we are all involved in one way.
And to tag on to that, he asked if there was if the general feeling of the locals towards the road. We were hoping that we would find somebody that was standing up and being vocal and really opposing the project, because we thought that would create like the perfect tension we needed for the film, you know. But unfortunately, we did not. We only found people that were really. We did find people that were really upset, and those were some of the people you saw in that meeting where they're like they're coming through our lands, they're not telling us, and that was just because the dozers would just go, and then the villagers wouldn't know which way they were going. There's little paint marks on rocks around, but you know, how do you interpret that? Like, there's not a lot of environmental impact, although they say they do environmental impact assessments. Like, the involvement is sometimes problematic in how they get people to those meetings, and a lot of people were feeling left out of the process. So we did meet one of those we met several of those villagers who were upset, but we met one that was really upset. And unfortunately, this isn't the best story to tell, but unfortunately, she thought I speak a bit of Nepali. My Nepali is okay, which is kind of how the communication was facilitated for most of the filmmaking. And this woman only spoke this Tibetan this subdialect of Tibetan, which is local to the area, and she didn't actually understand Nepali. So I couldn't really communicate with her. So I had the friend I alluded to before that came with us the first time. His name's Rinjin, who was introducing us who grew up in the area and was introducing us. He kind of conducted this first we were doing these little interviews that we knew we'd never use in the movie, but that we wanted to do just so people could see we were making a movie. And so we interviewed her in her home, and about halfway through, we kept asking, I was trying to get her to respond to this kind of same question you asked. And I think I just kept asking Rinjin to ask it in a slightly different way. And there was some point where she got upset with us, and like the interview stopped, and she was really upset. And what we learned later was that she was under the impression that we were somehow associated with the roads, and by talking to her, it was like an official visit, because she was seeking our help to figure out how to negotiate the situation, where we just wanted to, then that's where you understand. That's where like you start to understand, like, okay, these people are these communities, while they're media savvy, they're really open to like us filming whatever. So it probably means they haven't seen a lot of reality television, to be quite frank. Like they're not suspicious of the camera so much and what it can do or how their image could be manipulated. But this woman somehow I felt, I don't know, I don't know if I'm articulating this right, but that dynamic between what we were doing with the cameras and who we thought she was, and then her getting really mad at us. Like, she got legitimately mad at us, like fire in the eyes, kind of just like, get out of my house. This is done. Like, I don't know why you're here anymore. I hate to laugh about it, but it was serious. And that was the one time where we really felt that friction. And we would have loved to include her, and we kind of did in the story of that woman who's watching. We alluded to her a little bit. That wasn't her, but it was a neighbor of hers. But at that point, it's like we had broken the trust, and to get it back with her in particular would have been really difficult. And then everybody else we asked just was positive. That, can you believe the road's finally coming? It's great, but nobody felt like they were really thinking about what that meant, just that their life might be easier somehow. But didn't seem like rooted in a concrete idea. It felt like it was just just a general hopefulness, which is a great way to be. And it's actually like pretty common culturally, which is kind of the joy of being there, is people are so positive about, even despite having to grow all their own rice and cook all the food, grow all the own, their life is really hard on the subsistence level, but they're also very generous and hopeful and just fun loving, as as a generality. Like, it's hard to generalize, but it's pretty incredible the amount of hospitality that we felt along the way. Yeah.
It sort of seemed as though that the further up in the hills the families were, the more sort of I suppose connected to land they were, the more they were having conversations about crafts that might be lost. And then as you sort of get closer to the town, you can see what people are wearing and what people are doing. That it sort of changes.
Yeah, the stress level, you can feel it. I mean, I feel it here in New York. I mean, that's why I moved to the country, so to speak, out of the city. But yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of it is just like, this is life. It's relatable, yet the circumstance is definitely not regulated, let's say. Like, there's not a lot of thought to safety, or even like thought about equity, and it's a lot of corruption in the Kathmandu central level, and then there's not a lot of regulatory arms to figure out, like, they want these road projects. Narendra Modi and the prime minister of Nepal, I don't know the current or the former, have met several times. There's you can find dioramas of this particular highway. They build little sculpt, like, look at this highway we're building. This is the most important highway right now in Nepal. We really have to finish it because it's achievable on one hand, and the other hand, it's very economically advantageous for predominantly China, but also India. For Nepal, it just depends on, like, do they tariff people that use the highway? Because it's going to be a lot of passing through. I think more than like extraction of these medicinal herbs per se. Like, I don't know how much that will play into the global scheme of things, but there'll definitely be a lot of trucks passing through between the Bay of Bengal and mainland China. Because there's no other road right now that does it. But, well, they're very circuitous routes that do it. Yeah.
It doesn't seem that the road is for many of the people that we see in the film.
I don't get that impression. Yeah, exactly.
Before I start to wrap up, firstly, I just want to check: does anyone else want to ask a question? Did you try any of the medicinal herbs? Did you get any knowledge about?
That's like, I think I have to. We have to go back and make a sequel just so I can try all the medicinal herbs. I didn't.
They're illegal as well.
I mean, they're legal. I never did, and not for lack of wanting, but they also. I didn't try much of the, like when we were filming, we didn't try. They were always making this homemade millet, like kind of hot cold wine, milky wine. You see it in jugs. I don't know, you catch it in the film a little bit, but they always have a jar of it with them, and they would always offer it to us. So we never drank with them or partook in any sort of. We never ate with them per se. Like, we did try to separate our. I think it was because our extreme desire not to influence the process. We never did try it. But there's apparently I had talked to people who have tried Yarsagumba, and apparently it does give you this kind of light overall body high kind of feeling. It doesn't have any, it's not like cocaine or marijuana or something where it's not like a party drug or anything, but but it does apparently make you feel like it's more like Viagra. They would call it like the Himalayan Viagra. Like, it gives you, which I've never tried either, which gives you this kind of like boost of energy. When I first came across it in the 90s, they called it. I thought it was called life drug because that's what everyone was calling it, life medicine. But lo and behold, I found out it was called Yarsagumba later on. Yeah.
Thanks. That's really fascinating, and I really want to congratulate you on what is not just a survey of the landscape, but it's also kind of like a survey of time. It looks to the past, it looks to the future. It's a really good piece of work. I'll just quickly lift the camera up so you can see our lovely audience who've come to join us.
Cheers! Yeah, thank you for coming, everyone. Yeah,
thank you for coming.
Yeah, wonderful. And if anybody wants to reach out to us, we have a website, baatofilm.com. There's a contact form there. You can also sign up on our mailing list there. There's loads of other information about what screenings and whatnot. But please tell your friends. Yeah, thank you for coming.